And hello, this is Eamonn O'Brien. You're so welcome to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And coming up today, we're going to talk about what it takes to really hit home and have your messages brought home by your audiences. And the truth is, in this noisy world, that can be a tricky thing. And we have a fantastic expert in the chair all the way over in California. It is Lon Safko. Hello, Lon.
Hello, good to be here. This is exciting. What a great group. I'm looking forward to this.
And for those who don't know who Lon is, and I've known about you, Lon, for umpty-tumty years, because you are the author of Social Media Bible, which I gather is now in the 3rd edition and has a gazillion sales, which is really awesome.
Yeah, we actually just broke the $2 million retail mark on it.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. But you have more accolades than most anybody I've spoken with in the last while, because you're an inventor, you're the CEO of Innovative Thinking and other companies, you're an international keynote speaker, you get involved in motivation, in networking, and of course, social media is your bread and butter, I imagine. So yeah. I'm delighted to have you in the chair today.
I'm excited. This is fun. Let's enjoy this.
Well, so let me start with thinking about communication issues for speakers in general today. So for people who are kind of new to the game, tell me a little bit about your observations about the challenges that you commonly see new speakers encounter once they take to the boards.
Yeah, I think your keyword is reluctance. The reluctant speaker.
Yes.
It's fear. There's no question about it. And a lot of times people come up to me and say, well, just recently when I was in Austria, I spoke to a room of over 2,000. Yeah, that was one of my larger audiences. But it was, to me, it's just a heck of a lot of fun. So the first thing that I tell speakers that have any fear in front of getting people is don't be afraid. And that whole thing about picture them naked,
oh, no.
If you've seen some of those people, you don't want to do that. That's going to be too distracting.
No, I've told people never to do that when I'm in the audience. That doesn't bear thinking about it.
Exactly. So what really the best advice that I've given and what I learned myself is about having fun. Before you get on stage, laugh a little bit, smile, just pretend like you're telling a joke to yourself and just have a good time. So if you walk on with this positive, happy, giggly kind of an attitude, then it becomes fun. The second thing is that the fact that you're on the stage means that someone has chosen you as a subject matter expert. And everybody in the audience immediately looks at you as the subject matter expert. So no matter what happens, even if your pants fall off, they think that that's what was supposed to happen, that was all planned because that's part of your presentation. So no matter how bad the presentation goes, the people in the audience really don't know when you make a mistake. So if you do, don't apologize, just keep moving because nobody will ever notice.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And keeping those two things in mind, that's how I get through presentation after presentation. Just have fun and be quick on your feet.
Yeah. Now, and interestingly, I think I came across a blog post that you wrote maybe a couple of years ago where you're talking about the importance of being very human in your communication. And I liked that notion. But I suppose for many people, particularly if you're a bit buttoned up, you might think, well, gee, that's going to make me feel awfully vulnerable.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. If you're being yourself and somebody doesn't like it, they don't like you. So you have to kind of deal with that. But if you're enthusiastic and if you're energetic and if you know your subject matter, you will always come across in a way where people will like you. The other thing is I never use bullet points. Well, I use bullet points sometimes, but I never use a pre-written speech because no matter how many times you rehearse it, there is absolutely no way that you can pull it off without sounding rehearsed. Also, anytime I do any kind of an interview, I never ask for the questions ahead of time because I want everything to be spontaneous. So if you see me fumbling, it's because you and I never rehearsed this. And I think that's important, getting back to the humanity part. As long as you're human and you're being yourself and you're being sincere, people are going to connect with you on that level, kind of as a friend, and they're going to get more out of your presentation and they're not going to be as critical. So I very, very seldom ever hear anything negative that hurts my feelings personally. And if it does, then, that's business and it's all their fault and not mine. But it's about connecting.
Yeah, it is about connecting. And I liked what you said about having a conversation, because I think oftentimes people think when you're speaking that it's a bit of a performance. and it can't be a performance because then it's about you and not the people who are sitting in front of you.
Excellent observation. You're absolutely right. And the way that conversation can take place, I mean, you can, depending upon the format, you can actually take questions from the audience, and that's awesome. One time about connecting, I had two screens, one for the presentation and one for a live Twitter feed. And I asked people to tweet me what they wanted me to talk about in the presentation, which really was the most interesting experiment I ever done, because I wasn't able to use bullet points at all. And I'm watching the screen and I'm connecting, and people are commenting on what I'm saying, and I'm answering their questions, all as part of this live presentation. That was a heck of a lot of fun. The other thing I found is over 60% of the tweets came from people that were not in the presentation. They weren't even in the building. Yeah. So there was this engagement. But really the best way is just watching their facial expressions. I'll make a comment, I'll say something, and I can tell instantly just by looking at the audience whether they understand it, whether they need more on that subject, or whether it was time to move on. You can see it in people's faces.
Yeah, well, and the interesting element of that, actually, when you were talking about your experience with the Twitter engagement there, and then maybe it's been interesting kind of segue to talk about the kinds of things that people can do, if you like, to start conversations before they get into the room, as well as when they're in the room, and actually to continue the conversations after the fact, because that's all part and parcel now of how you can build upon, I suppose, your message.
Yeah, absolutely. In social media, and I don't want to harp on it because I wrote the biggest book on earth on social media.
Harp away.
But, you know, when it gets right down to it, really, it's about social media. So I'll be posting things on Facebook to try to get the conversation going ahead of time. I'll be sometimes, like, you know, you do an excellent job of writing blogs. Well, maybe, you know, you write one ahead of time and get the company to post it on their blog site, so that people get to know who you are ahead of time. Setting up free press. Sometimes if I'm going into Asia, we talked about that earlier, I'll contact a couple of the local radio stations, especially the business-based radio stations, and do a couple of interviews just to build a little bit of excitement. So, but really one of the most useful tools for a speaker is Twitter. Because it's so real, it's so now, it's short bursts of information. So by creating a hashtag ahead of time is a really great way to start that conversation before you ever step on stage, and to continue the conversation long after you've said thank you. Absolutely, because they feel they already know you a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's that connecting on the human level. Yeah. And tell me, because you're a man who's traveled all over the globe, and we were talking off air about your trips to Asia, and really you've gone far and wide, European and Asian tours. So if you think about all the kinds of people that you've seen speaking over the years, and things that maybe haven't gone so well for them, areas where you think now, you know, here's a little bit of guidance that would have helped to smooth your path, what would be top of your here's what you should know list? Wow, that's a tough one, and I'm glad you sprung that on me. And here's one of those moments where I'm going to stall a little bit while I try to think of some of those stories. Well, the biggest problem for people who speak, you can tell when they're afraid, and you can tell when they're trying to be rehearsed and they're trying to do it perfectly, and it's not just coming naturally. And that's this hurdle, that's this line that you're going to have to cross in your own mind. And the only way you can do that is doing a lot of presentations. I worked for a company when I decided that I was going to become a professional speaker, and I did 100 cities in the United States in 1 year. Oh my God. That's exhausting. And they were all day sessions. This was all day. So I would start on Monday and go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, come home, and the following Monday I'd be back out again. And I knew that if I could speak 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, in 100 cities a year, by the time I was done, I'd feel pretty comfortable with whatever situation I was in, including international. So that's really the first thing, is that if you're scared or stiff, as you'd said, you come across that way. So you got to keep practicing until you have enough confidence that that doesn't happen. And then the rest of it is just technical. Make sure your sound is working properly. The biggest mistake people make is they use white backgrounds on their PowerPoints. And you won't read about that anywhere. You don't use white with black letters like you would think. You use a dark background with white letters, because a white background from the back of the room is too much white and it washes out the letters and you can't see it. Yeah, I learned that the hard way. I was going to say, and that's especially true when a little bit of ambient light is let into the room, and then people can't see it at all. it completely washes out. But because we're always used to black letters on a white background, everybody goes right for that format. But actually the reverse works better. So it's little technical things that you learn over the years that you kind of experiment with, or let's just say be inspired by other speakers.
Yeah.
Not plagiarized, but inspired.
That's exactly right. Well, that's the sincerest form of flattery, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of people flatter the heck out of me.
Now, interestingly, you mentioned something about when you're talking about the PowerPoint earlier on, you were talking about how you don't use a lot of bullet points. Tell me a little bit about that and why that's so important.
Yeah, there's a general rule in PowerPoint, and I break it all the time. But the general rule is no more than 3 bullet points and no more than 5 words per bullet point. That is the actual formula. Now, again, I break it because, basically there's 2 different types of speakers. There's a content provider, which I kind of consider myself content, and then there's storytellers. So a content provider will have a lot of content-rich slides, in which case those bullet points, there's going to be a lot of them, and they're going to be full sentences, they're going to be statistics, they're going to be case studies, and I kind of prefer that because after the presentation, if you have a copy of my slides, you can refer to them and it actually becomes a reference book for that material. And more importantly, just between you and me, it also becomes a marketing piece because the more they refer to it, the more they remember you. And then the other type are storytellers. Eric Qualman is a great storyteller. He'll never have more than 5 points in a full 1-hour keynote. And for each one of those points, he only generally has like 1 bullet point. And he'll talk for 10 minutes on each one of these. And it'll be some kind of an inspiring story that will make you feel good about the subject matter and make you feel like you can do it.
Yeah, well, I have to say that by and large, even the rule that you were talking about, the notion of having no more than 3 bullet points on a slide, I would discourage even that, because the truth is people don't remember words, but they do remember what they say. So that's an interesting one. But that said, I suppose if you're thinking in a broader sense about, again, because we're talking about hitting it out of the park, if you like, and what it takes to do that. If you think about the hardest lesson, and you obviously had a road warrior experience when you did 100 gigs in a year. I'm just exhausted thinking about that. But what was the hardest lesson you had to really drill into your head, do you think?
Well, there's when you do that much, and I actually called it boot camp, like the training in military, because it really was intense. The first thing is every single day. It doesn't matter whether you've just spent 24 hours, 25 hours on an airplane getting to India. It doesn't matter if you cross 12 time zones. The work that I just came back from India, and I taught for 3 days. Well, body time, I would start at 7 o'clock at night and teach until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's what my body was telling me. But I had to be enthusiastic and powerful, and there could be no lulls. So the first thing is, it doesn't matter how you feel. You have to come across enthusiastic and excited and sincere, no matter what you've been doing or how many cities you've been doing it in. That really is the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you, because when that happens, then you have a level of trust. When people are looking at you and they back you as well as your idea.
Absolutely. And sometimes I'll tell them, matter of fact, in India, I'll say, I'm just putting you on a notice that it's 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and I got to go until 5 o'clock, but I'm going to keep this pace going because I respect you. Oh, and they love that because they know that I do respect them that much.
Yeah, no. Well, and of all the things now that surprised you, I suppose, if you think about when you started, and maybe you've acquired this over a period of time, what was the thing that stood out for you as, oh, gee, really?
I got to tell you that we talked a little bit off air about the different cities that I've been in, and just in the last 90 days, as I said, I've presented in Kuala Lumpur, Shanghai, Dubai, Singapore, Bangkok, Mumbai, Delhi, Austria. The thing is that, and that's just in the last 90 days, the thing that amazes me is that no matter who the audience is, it all comes down to the same human nature. People are different, cultures are different, but when you connect with them, they're still human beings. I'm serious as I can be right now. The the person in Shanghai, when you're connecting with them, is no different than the person in Mumbai or the person in California. Basically, we all have the same needs, the same desires, the same pain points, and we all want to communicate and connect on that same basic level.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's a great way in which to round out, because I think you're hitting the nail on the head when you talk about how all connection has to be on a personal human level. So it's never from a height, it has to be on a personal human level.
It really does, because if you don't connect, they won't believe, there will be no takeaways, there'll be no value, and they'll walk out of the room dissatisfied, in which case you'll never get the next speaking or training gig.
Yes. And if you had one tip, one final tip that you would give people on better speaking, what would be top of your list?
Know your audience. Know what their pain points are. Do a little bit of research. Anytime that I speak, even if it's a 1-hour keynote, I'll go to their website. I'll see who there are, what the culture is. I'll take a look at their press releases, because that's what's important to that company right now. I'll maybe do a Google search or a Twitter search to see what the conversation is taking place about that company. And then before I speak, I try to meet some of the people, shake hands and say, yeah, I'm your speaker, maybe at breakfast or coffee or one of the breaks. And I'll just kind of ask them about what they do with the company and what the company's heading is. So there's a lot of inside information. You can really kind of get into the minds of your audience just through a couple of easy tips. Research online, meet a few people before you speak. So that way, when you are, even if it's content, you always present a tool, then you present a story, and then a tool and a story. Well, these stories can be actually tailored directly to that company and to what they're feeling right now, what they're paying, what they're trying to accomplish. And that significantly increases the takeaways and your ability to be hired again.
Well, that's awesome advice. And can I thank you so much for joining me all the way from California?
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me. This is a great group, and I love what you're doing.
Good. And I'm looking forward to visiting California, hopefully not in 175 degrees temperature that you all have right now.
Sorry. Love to be in Ireland right now.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so thank you again. Much appreciated. And
thank you, sir.
Yeah, and thank you also for watching the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And until the next time, happy speaking.